Next.js was not very popular. It was still pretty new. I would search online to try to find things and couldn't really find much. So I started to make a bunch of videos and tutorials about how Next.js works, to the point where when you would search like Next.js tutorial, it was basically just all my stuff. That feeling I had when Next.js was just getting started was kind of the same feeling I had with learning to code with AI, except like 10 times more. I've been coding for 15 years, writing code, and have been teaching how to code for the last half already now. So time has flown by since making that career transition. Started doing a lot of work in open source and teaching people on my own, and then got pretty active in the React and Next.js community. Was using React for a few jobs prior to eventually joining Purcell and working on Next.js, and did that for 5 years. And just as of a few months ago, have joined Cursor to work on all things developer experience and just generally help teach how to code with AI.
Today's episode is sponsored by Inbound, my own product. Inbound is the best way to send and receive emails all through a super developer-friendly API and SDK. You can set up webhooks on email addresses to trigger certain actions or even integrate with your existing AI platform. Try it out today at inbound.new.
You've been working in education and sort of developer advocacy for a while now. How'd you end up in this line of work?
Yeah, I didn't intend to set out doing this type of work. I kind of stumbled into it, but in a strange roundabout way, it all makes sense. I've heard somebody describe that the things that you do when you're like 12, 13, 14 years old and you obsess over and that you spend all your time and energy doing somehow end up being things that you do later in life as well. And when I was 12 years old, I was playing a lot of video games and editing videos for video games. So I was very into online forums and video games and editing videos and learning about 3D rendering and After Effects and Photoshop. And at the time, I thought I was going to be a graphic designer, but then eventually decided, oh, I like computers. I think I'm going to do this programming thing. Over the years, as I got a job as a software engineer, I liked writing code, but I didn't like writing code for the sake of writing code. I liked building things. So code was just a means to building whatever I thought was interesting. And for me, websites, web applications was my favorite medium for code because it was very easy for me to take a link, share it with somebody, see that thing live and just online around the world very easily. And about 2017, 2018, I started doing a lot of writing and then videos on the things I was learning at the job. So as I was writing React code as a software engineer for my day job, I would search the internet and I would find things or not find things. And I would write up how I made the solution. You know, in a pre-AI world, those articles were really helpful. So I started doing that and I ended up making a few courses teaching how to build React applications going into 2019 and 2020. And at the time, Next.js was not very popular. It started in 2016. And when I had adopted it at work in, let's call it 2018, it was still pretty new. I would search online to try to find things and couldn't really find much. The community was kind of just getting started. So I started to make a bunch of videos and tutorials about how Next.js works, to the point where when you would search like Next.js tutorial, it was basically just all my stuff because there was nobody else really making a lot of stuff at the time. So the Vercel team then reached out and was like, hey, do you want to do this as your job? And I hadn't ever really considered doing that as a job. I thought in my head that in 10, 15, 20 years, I would be a senior staff expert, distinguished engineer, just writing a bunch of code. I didn't think that I would kind of fork into this path of doing developer education. But in hindsight, it actually makes a lot of sense because I've always felt that it was more about just building something interesting. And I liked being on the fringes of how software development was made. So things like product management or technical documentation or teaching people about how the actual products are built and how they work. It was always a little bit more than just writing the code. Same thing with design. So it wasn't intentional, but I'm glad I landed here.
It's interesting because a lot of DevRels have often said that same type of thing where it's like, I didn't expect DevRel to be a job. Because if you really think about like the core thing, it's you're teaching, you're enjoying building stuff, you're not just focusing on the code, and you're making content and videos. And who wouldn't love that job? And that's how I got into it. They were like, hey, would you like to do this for your job? And I'm like, yes, I didn't know that was an option. I didn't see that button in the drop down. And it's very interesting to see how DevRel has evolved over the years. And you definitely helped build the public perception of DevRel at Vercel, and you grew the Next.js development community to millions and millions of devs. Did you have like a sort of formula or system that you came up with to essentially guide yourself to have this sort of structured teaching method?
Well, first, just to echo your point around it wasn't on the drop down. Like I didn't know that this was an option, especially coming out of college, university. Like they don't really do, at least where I went to university, like they don't talk as much about the other roles that are still doing software, but are not a software engineer. So I didn't really know this existed. But I think that the common thread amongst a lot of people who end up in DevRel work is that they have experience as a software engineer. They've been building production software at some point, and then a little bit down the road, they end up kind of transitioning into something like this. It's much easier to do it that way than to start trying to teach people without having that applied experience of here's this time where I had to debug this really gnarly error, or, I wrote this really wild code back in the day. Like my first internship was writing C# code and doing a lot of tests. So I was basically doing a QA engineer role. I was writing a lot of tests. I was doing a lot of C#, and I didn't know what I was doing. I was just totally figuring it out as I went. This was a long time ago back in college. But yeah, it's funny to see how it kind of transitions over time. But going back to DevRel at Vercel and Next.js, I think the thing that I tried to do was show people the art of what is possible. Show people what you can build with this technology. Next.js is a tool that you can use for anything. You can build any type of website, any type of web application. So with that, great power comes a lot of potential ambiguity. Like, what am I going to build with this thing? I can do anything with it. So to try to show how the features work and to get people excited about what we're building, it was helpful for me to build demos that were both practical but also polished and exciting. It was what actually got me interested in taking the role at Vercel in the first place, because they had done a very good job about making demos that showed the technology that were not just throwaway demos. They were actual real applications where you could go look at the code and you're like, oh, this is actually structured pretty well. I learned something from reading this code. It had a nice design. It was very practical. And you look at it and you would start to think, wow, I just have so many ideas for things that I can build now. And those are the best type of advocacy / demos, I think, is you kind of light that spark in somebody's brain to know, okay, based on this technology, here's the thing that I can go build now, which is, I think, the fun part.
I think, and not to jump ahead, but I'm going to jump ahead just because the parallels that I can draw here are insane. You took that ambiguity of Next.js and you turned it into a product that basically, when somebody watched one of your videos, they're like, wait, I can build my own project with this. I can do this with this. In the same way, AI is extremely ambiguous. Here's this chat box that can unlock trillions of opportunities for you. Go. And it's like some people need to be molded into what they can do with that. So I am very excited to see how you'll turn that in. I know you've only been, how long have you been at Cursor, if I may ask?
2 months.
2 months. You've already shipped a ton of great demos and explainers that are basically like that 0 to 1 step that kind of just show people, here's Cursor. It looks intimidating, but it's not. Just ask and treat it like a normal human. And I think that's going to be extremely valuable for people because you're just morphing that ambiguous cloud into just try this. And then that will click in their brain and be like, whoa, I can do this and this and this. Do you think that like similar path is going to happen with AI?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because it definitely is how I felt internally when I was kind of deciding that I wanted to rotate in and spend all this energy on teaching AI. The same thing that I felt in, wow, this technology is really powerful and it feels like a lot of people don't understand how to use it. That feeling I had when Next.js was just getting started was kind of the same feeling I had with learning to code with AI, except like 10 times more, because it's more than just JavaScript or TypeScript or React or that ecosystem. It's people writing Java, people writing C++, people writing Python. Like it's any type of code. It's the whole act of our jobs of being engineers. And something I've thought a lot about now is the pedantic distinction between a developer and an engineer. And, for the longest time, I felt like there was this transition from front-end developers and back-end developers where you were kind of siloed or boxed in. Oh, I write the CSS, I write the JavaScript, I do the React, to more of like a product engineer and an infra engineer or DevOps engineer, because I think people started to become more generalists and the tools got better, the abstractions got better. And if I was primarily a backend engineer, React was so good that they could actually go and contribute maybe some of the front end changes to their feature they were adding, even if they weren't, design experts. The composition model, I think, just clicked in so many people's brains in the way that a backend engineer could contribute to the code base too. So they kind of became this full stack product engineer. That was actually the thing that got me really excited about Next.js. Is I was predominantly, I would say, a front end engineer. That was where my brain really clicked. And then Next.js was like, hey, you could just make this folder with a file that turns into an API. Just don't worry about going and setting up all this other infrastructure. Just make a file. And it really unlocked this new possibility of all these different backend things that you can do. So Next.js helped me write a lot more backend code than I had previously. Across the industry, we saw this transition from front-end, backend engineer split to more of like a product engineer, infra engineer split. But now there's an even bigger split or change happening with AI, where AI engineers are the most generalist of them all. Because when you learn to code with AI, you can do the whole thing.